Okay, hello, Kitty. First of all, I watched the show, and it is so wonderful in terms of comedy and tackling mental illness and stuff like that. And I was watching some interviews by you where you talked about getting the feel of the scene or of the show while conversing with the director. So I want to
Mhm.
know in a specific show like that, oh, hello, dog, too. How did you get the feel for it? By talking to the director, like, what did you decide on how you
Yeah.
wanted to shoot this show?
Yeah. So early on, I was in conversation with James Ponsoldt, who is the director of the pilot and one of the producers. And James and I talked a lot about that we really cared about these characters for one thing. That this family was very real to us, this found family of friends and everything, and that the show itself tonally goes from slapstick comedy to, you know, some very dry humor, and then into real grief and real pain and real feelings. And I might have to get the squeaky toy away from the dog 1 second.
All right.
um, so because of all that, we talked about how can we visually bring this world to life in a way that can be this container for all of the range of what happens in the show. And so what really struck me instinctually is to have it be very grounded and feel like a real place, and to light it very naturalistically, and to let the place be real, and then let both the silly stuff and the very serious heartfelt stuff exist in that.
And this is exactly what I wanted to ask you. Like, as a DP, what is your role in trying to capture something like comedy, like awkwardness? Because this is what I felt. There is a lot of awkwardness, a lot of love, but also a lot of awkward situations, people not comfortable in their own skin. And this was transmitted to me as a viewer. So, how, as a DP, as a cinematographer, do you capture this on screen?
Hmm. That's an interesting question.
Thank you.
I think that the one I have a lot of animals needing me here this morning. Um,
Same here.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I'm actually gonna do one quick thing for my dog here, and then I'll be back, and I won't be interrupted.
All right.
Okay,
All right.
about that. Okay, so I think the main thing that I've learned is it's something that is actually not like an exact science, right? It's almost like I talk to the camera operators about us, the camera, as a witness to what's happening. It's bearing witness to the emotions in the room and to what the characters are going through. And so, kind of separate from how we frame it, or the lens choice that we make, it's almost like a more of a spiritual positioning for the operator, or an emotional place for the operator to be in when they're in the room. And we talk a lot about just being open and receiving as the person behind the camera, to take in whatever's happening and the feeling in the room. So I don't know that it's an exact. I don't think it comes from the head. I think it comes from the heart,
So,
honestly.
does your feelings transmit to the actors too? I mean, usually the conversation is between the cinematographer and the director, but what about the actors? Are they affected by the cinematographer and the choices?
Yes, I mean, actors will often say, that they can feel the energy in the room with them. So whoever is behind the camera, sometimes it's me, most of the time it was one of our operators, and that matters. And so, knowing that, for years now of knowing that, then that's why I kind of guide my camera operators into this place of being open and receiving to whatever's happening in the room.
Okay, so very interesting choices of projects, like Transparent, Big Little Lies season two, and then this. But they're all different. They all exist in their own realms, their own universes, if you can say.
Mm.
So, what draws you to a certain project and why specifically shrinking?
Um, I tend to like shows that are not afraid to kind of go into how humans struggle to figure themselves out and figure out the world around them. That's generally what I'm drawn to. And as far as shrinking, I mean, I love Ted Lasso, and
Me too.
and it was a show that when I first got on a Zoom call to interview for the possibility of working on shrinking,
Hello, doggy.
he found another one. I told them that, Ted Lasso pretty much like during the pandemic, Ted Lasso saved me and my family just with its message of hope and the amount of laughter that you got each week, but also just the humanity of the characters and the compassion in that show.
Definitely.
It's like they know they want my attention instead of me
Exactly.
giving them.
My cat is sneaking around, so I'll try
Oh
to.
yeah, 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 yeah. Anyway, so it was the Ted Lasso factor, right? Knowing
Yeah,
that I got the script for the pilot for Shrinking before the interview, and it was clear to me that this was going to be a show where you were going to feel a lot of things, that you were going to laugh out loud, but then you were also going to feel. And if it's okay on your end, I might not just.
I'm totally fine with
Okay.
it because I have it here. Like I can expect my Leo
Okay.
to do something. So go on.
So yes, yes.
It's
So
at
so in that
Flair.
way, so in reading the script and then talking with the producers on that first Zoom call, I just knew that the project was going to be one where I would get to feel a lot of things as a participant and a collaborator, but also that the show was going to deliver this kind of really wonderful range of what these human beings are going through, stumbling forward to try and figure themselves out.
Okay, so for me, a character introduction is sometimes a definitive moment in anything, a film, a TV show. And here we have the Jimmy introduction, we have introduction with Paul. How do you capture the character introduction in terms of how this character is first viewed on the
Mm-hmm.
screen?
Yeah, well, I mean, we mostly talked about Jimmy because
Yeah,
it's his story. Obviously everyone has their stories, but we definitely he's the primary one, right? And
I probably mentioned Paul because I love him so much.
oh yeah, 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 yeah. Oh no, and that was a really fun thing because I signed on to the show before we knew who was going to play Paul, so it was a big deal for everybody when Harrison Ford said yes. That was amazing.
Yeah.
Um, but as far as Jimmy, we talked about this. He's in this very dark place, right? We meet him when he's still doing drugs and staying up all night, uh, and so one of the two things came to my mind. One was that he spends a lot of time in the shadow, and that when he is in the light, that it's not it's a harsh light. So you may remember in the pilot, he in the morning, or he's up all night, and then he says goodbye to the women who are there, and then he goes into the kitchen and he's kind of confronted with reality, with his daughter, with the fact that it's a school day, a work day, and I purposely we lit into the kitchen with this very hard light so that Jimmy is literally sitting and having to kind of shield himself from the harsh light. And that to me, those are the little subtle sometimes or not so subtle sometimes creative ways that you can kind of say a lot about where the character is at.
And what it's
Uh,
feeling too at the moment.
yes. Yeah. And then as far as Paul, I mean, honestly, we just, made sure to make a nice frame and let Harrison Ford enter the room and do his thing.
And it's
You know?
charisma. It's like 100% charisma.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
exactly.
what is the most difficult to shoot? Like for me, the idea of sitting behind the camera is like, wow, okay. So what is the most difficult? Like, is it an intimate scene? Is it a scene where the actor is like crying their eyes
Mm.
out? Or is it just a slapstick comedy scene where you have to go with all the action?
Um, I mean, I would say different scenes obviously have different challenges, right? I'm much more used to, given all my years on Transparent and other shows like that, where there were a lot of intimate scenes in that show, both emotional and physical
I
intimate.
love transparent.
Oh, thanks. Me too. And so those aren't. I don't find those that challenging. I mean, I think the biggest challenge on this show was, that most of our spaces are on stage, they're sets, right? And so how to keep those feeling real. And the other thing was like there's a lot of scenes in the employee break room, and so just trying to not do the same thing each time. So in that way it was more mundane challenge where it's like, okay, the three characters are back in the break room, and now one of them sitting and two of them are standing. How, what can we do with the camera, what can we do lighting wise so that it's something, not in a huge way, because obviously it's like the room is still the same room, the windows are still where they are, so light's going to only come in a certain way. But I think just kind of keeping it fresh in subtle ways as the season progressed, as we're repeating the spaces that we're in.
So do the elements in every scene, in every set, kind of like create the mood? Like when you're in Jimmy's house, for example, unlike when you're there in the clinic, unlike
Mm-hmm.
when you're just out there, Jimmy being Jimmy and just grappling with all the characters that he meets every day. So do the certain elements, or let me say the mise en scène, do these things together create like the dynamic of the scene? And how do you keep it fresh every time if you're shooting in a repeated
Yeah.
set?
Well, so one thing that came to mind with your question was that as the season progresses, Jimmy's world gets brighter. I mean, one thing that we did, which again, I'm not sure if it shows up for the viewers, but that our set decorator, Andrea Fenton, came up with this idea of that the plants in Jimmy's office are basically, uh, if not dead, about to die. Like they're neglected plants around in the corners of his office. And then as the season progresses, he starts off screen, this is, but he starts to take care of the plants and they come back to, healthier living. And so again, I don't know if that's ever going to be that apparent to the viewer, but similarly, what we did was took Jimmy from a place where there's more shadow in his house. The sun doesn't, I mean, with the exception of what I talked about, where the sun was very harsh, that sunshine doesn't really get into Jimmy's life, into his world, until he starts to kind of find his way later in the season. So that's kind of one example. And besides that, I'm trying to think if there's anything specific. Just like I said, just to kind of decide, okay. I mean, one thing that I do with my gaffer, whose name is Paul Samaniego, is we talked about, okay, if even though we're on stage and we could pretend that we could make the sun come from anywhere we wanted, let's determine which way the sun at the clinic, which way the sun actually rises, and kind of abide by that rule. And then we just decide when we're going to shoot a scene, okay, what's the feeling of the scene? Is it overcast and cloudy out, or can there be some sun that comes into Paul's office? I mean, one thing that you might notice is like in Gabby's world, the sun is always on her.
Definitely.
Like she is that character, right? She is. I mean, her clothing tells us that, and so I definitely made it a conscious point of like, oh yeah,
Sun follows her
it's always sunny in Gabby's
in
office.
Gavin's
Yeah.
mind. Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Okay, so one of the shots that I really loved, there was an extreme close-up, and we had Jason Segel's, we had Jamie's face, and water was running, tap water was
Mm-hmm.
running. So how do you come up with these with these really, really intimate close-ups? Like I'm always in awe of scenes where, like it's the actor's face or something action is happening really close. Like how does the
Mm-hmm.
cinematographer kind of like do it or find it?
Yeah. Well, so that was the moment was described in the script in the pilot, and then uh, James, the director of the pilot, basically very early on said, I want to make a sync, a fake sync, so we can get the camera right there and be in the sync with Jimmy. And it's one of those things that, I mean, so that was a very cool idea to me. It was just gonna be fun, right? So then we get the construction people and some of the art department folks to like construct this plexiglass sink, but then you have to think about the other aspects, like, okay, well, the water can't just fill up because we want to stay with Jimmy's face as the water runs by him. It's just like the little fun. Everything's a puzzle, right?
Yeah,
It's like this, you get the scene for the day. It's like, okay, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? And so I know that that's a big reason why I love this business, and many of us on the crew, like it's the puzzle of it. So in this case, they tested a couple different size tanks to see, like, what's too deep or what's too shallow, and how do we, it can only be so uh, wide, or the lens can only be so wide before you see the edges of the fake sink. So in this case, it was just a matter of having some time to prep and test it out beforehand. And then what's great about it is that on the day, I mean, the other thing about TV is you are moving quickly, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even with these great creative moments of like, let's have a fake sink and put the camera in the fake sink and get the shot, we had probably 10 or 15 minutes to get that shot. And it's like, so everything has to be ready, and you kind of cross your fingers and hope it's going to work out. And in that case, it did. And I love that shot too. And it's a
I
great,
love it so much. Yeah.
again, it tells you so much about where he's at, that he's, taking a shower in the sink at work.
Exactly. This is why I mentioned that. So I want to know, like, have you ever faced a certain situation where you felt like it's so challenging, not only on shrinking, but also on, something like transparent, because I'm a big fan. So have you ever felt like there was something so challenging, shot wise, shooting wise, and you felt like you had to work the magic? Like you just told me something that is so magical, and we see it in a glimpse. We never know what is behind the work that is done.
Yeah. Hmm. I'm trying to think of another example. Um, it's a little hard for me to remember specifics on transparent because it's been a few years now. But
Yeah. I
I
wish I
don't know.
was there
What's that?
talking to you. I wish I was there talking to you about it, probably.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Um, I mean, I guess the thing that okay, the big memory I have from Transparent is that we wouldn't rehearse, so it was even more of a. I mean, that was a situation where Joey Soloway, the creator of that show, really wanted us to be in a place of discovery, the actors and the camera operators and me and all the people involved in the scene. And so it was very often we wouldn't rehearse it, we would just see what was going to happen, but we would film it. And then sometimes on the next take the actors would try something different, so then we had to the cameras had to be very nimble and respond to that. And early on that was sort of like, whoa, we're on a roller coaster, like I don't know which way we're going, or when we're going to go upside down or turn left or right, whatever. And then after a short while, just getting used to that and really appreciating that, because that was a big part of the kind of secret sauce of that show, like the magic of what made that show work, is like you really felt like things were unfolding right in front of you. um, so I don't know if that answers your question, but that was one.
Definitely. Yeah, more than answers it. Thank you. So, what I want to ask too is the idea of working with an actor like Harrison Ford. How does it
Mhm.
feel like to see this person in front of you and you have all this like previous history of his
Right.
greatness on screen? How does it feel? Or does it sometimes feel like normal or strangely normal? Like, how does it feel?
Well, so I definitely, like I grew up like many people, like going to the movies, seeing on the huge screen this amazing heroic figure, handsome, dashing, funny, um, charming, or charismatic, as you said. And so let's say the first 10 days that Harrison was around, everybody was kind of like, that's Indiana Jones, that's Han Solo, and sort of not able to kind of get over it, and still do our jobs, but like we were definitely all starstruck. And then what was really amazing is that he is just a human being. Not only that, but he's a very kind guy, and he loves being on a set. He loves the crew. He loves talking to the grips or hanging out with the makeup people, or chatting with the moon person. I mean, and because he's basically spent the last whatever 50 some years on a movie set, and the guy doesn't have to work anymore. He doesn't need money, but I think he just loves it so much, and he loves being in that group of these oddballs and weirdos on the film set. So he's just a very down to earth guy. And so what was it was even the strangest part was like how ordinary it became. It's like, oh hey Harrison, you know what I mean? Especially after that, the beginning of like being totally starstruck.
Okay. All right. Now I came to the ending of my conversation. Thank you so much, Jim. You were so awesome and open with me, and I really thank you for this conversation. Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, thank you, Jaylan, and have a great rest of your day or evening.
Okay, you too.
All right.
Bye-bye.